Sun, where you look at it and you say, you can see from Kyogre and Groudon. So we'll see if Marco is going to switch up his leads like he did on stream earlier today. This time around, it will be Torkoal Jump Up, that patented lead combo, setting up the Sun, and then with the Chlorophyll ability on Jump Up, doubling its speed. Compared to Gothitelle Kingdra, they cannot switch out.
So Torkoal is trapped here. It can try to eject button itself out. That may be an important tool over the course of the match, but won't be able to switch. That makes it easy to switch in Politoed and go for a Muddy Water, but that's the reason that the manual Sunny Day is so important for the jump off. But unfortunately, if the Politoed were to switch in, that Muddy Water from Kingdra will move before the jump off, unless the jump off can get Tailwind ahead of time. So it's going to be really complicated speed interactions here, where both players can really lose a lot in a moment. If Marco just loses the Torkoal to a Muddy Water here, that's kind of devastating, but a Draco into jump off might also be very devastating.
Politoed will swap into the position there, so it sets up the Rain with its digital ability, and now instead of a jump up having double speed, now the Kingdra has double speed thanks to its ability Swift Swim, doubling its speed. With the Stellar Terrestrialization, he's going to do even more damage with these attacks that he already has the shared typing with, which is Dragon and Water. So this Draco Meteor is even stronger into this jump up. No Focus Sash means that's a one-hit KO.
That's the power of Gothitelle. There was no counterplay to that. Jumpluff does not have Protect. Jumpluff could not switch. Jumpluff was just sitting duck to get Draco Meteored, and all it's going to get back is a very weak overheat into Politoed. The main thing it accomplishes is getting Torkoal out of here.
That's the big adjustment over Scarlet and Violet, that these Torkoal sets are running Eject Pack to swap themselves out after a stat drop. You can see from an Intimidate or from an Overheat, dropping your stats. It does allow Marco to switch either Ursaluna or Charizard in the back. Ursaluna would activate Flame Orb on this turn, but the issue is that there's no Trick Room, meaning Wolf's Pokemon are still faster.
Yeah, I mean, you can see the problem here. All three remaining Pokemon for Marco are weak to water. You can only spend the Terrestrialization on one of them. There's no speed control option left. The Tailwind is gone, and Porygon 2 wasn't brought. So for a moment, it can look pretty good because you can get the Torkoal back in, or at least threaten the switch of the Torkoal coming back in to set Sun. But it's only a matter of time until the same trap of Gothitelle to trap a couple things in while the Politoed switch is being threatened can be established again. Even if Wolf has to give up a Pokemon to create that position again, it's always a looming threat for Marco. So you can't just be playing the situation right in front of you. It has to be, how do I get enough advantage out of this to deal with that future possibility?
There is one benefit to Marco, that Kingdra has already had its special attack lowered by 2 stages thanks to the Draco Meteor on the last turn. So that means even with the Stellar Terrestrialization is going to be doing significantly less damage for Kingdra, so that might be a turn that Wolf wants to switch these Pokemon around, maybe switch Politoed out as well to reset the Rain.
Yeah, both of these Pokemon probably need to leave the field eventually. You need to reestablish Rain, you need to not lose the Kingdra while it's having to fight in Sun, and you want to get rid of those special attacks. So no surprise to see it switch out immediately. This is where Marco's opportunity to capitalize on that really active first turn from Wolf starts. With this double switch, this is where you can try to go do a lot of damage.
And now, if Marco was anticipating a double switch, you can have 2 strong attacks into both of Wolf's new Pokemon. It's Incineroar and the Gothitelle. Gothitelle with Shadow Tag is trapping, could be trapping them, but the Torkoal swapped out before Gothitelle was brought in on the turn. So Charizard will switch into the slot. Earthquake, free teammate to have your Earthquake next to, with Charizard being a flying type. And thanks to the Intimidate, Incineroar is not KO'd by Ursaluna's Earthquake there. If it was at neutral attack, that would have been a one-hit KO.
I'm not sure it's so bad for Marco that that didn't KO. You can imagine if it had KO'd, that is Kingdra,
right,
and then switch back to Politoed. But that's, again, what's being threatened here. Not actually even getting a KO in that turn of a full advantage where Wolf has to double switch. It may be pretty poor for Marco in the long run. Because now both of those crucial Pokemon, the Kingdra and the Politoed, are in the back. Now Wolf has to still navigate to them. Incineroar, you have Scout being threatened by both Pokemon here. You also have Parting Shot being threatened, so there's a lot of different options for how to get out of this position. We'll see what Wolf opts for, but first a Terrestrialization coming in from Marco, going to take away that water weakness, turn Ursaluna into a Ghost type.
Yeah, he's got to choose one of these water weaks, Pokemon I should say, and get rid of that weakness. Now Ursaluna going from normal ground to Ghost type here, changing up its defensive chart.
Crucially, the Ghost type will also allow it to switch out of the Shadow Tag on the next turn.
Air Slash into Incineroar, does connect and gets the KO. So Gothitelle protects itself, but didn't get hit anyway on that turn. The Earthquake doesn't do any damage. Now Wolf can switch one Pokemon in, either Politoed or Kingdra, into that slot.
That preemptive Ghost Terrestrialization is so crucial because you cannot both turn into a Ghost and switch on the same turn. You have to have established the Ghost typing on a previous turn to be allowed to switch out of Shadow Tag. But now, because there is a Ghost type on the field, the option to switch to Torkoal, a switch that should be slower than either a switch on Wolf's side, could mitigate some of the offense. Now, you have to imagine, it's still a Terrestrialization boost. It's still a super effective Muddy Water into Charizard. It's not clear that just getting Sun in would be enough to save Charizard, but it would be enough to save the speed advantage. If Kingdra does not have Swift Swim, Kingdra should not be faster than the Charizard, and the Charizard would be able to put out a ton of damage. So, an interesting turn, because also, if Wolf just doesn't make the switch yet, and Torkoal switches in preemptively, that's really bad for Marco. So a very dangerous turn here. Either player could kind of spin that crucial switch, that crucial bit of positioning right now. Wolf is the first to switch. Gothitelle going into the back, Politoed coming out.
Yep, we know Politoed with this switch will get rid of the Sun, reactivate the Rain with its Drizzle ability, and make the Kingdra the fastest Pokemon on the field. The Muddy Water, though, it avoids Charizard. Charizard would have been weak to Muddy Water, and it's not going to take any damage. Ursaluna hangs on in the red because he's no longer weak to water. And now the Air Slash on the Politoed on the switch in will bring it down to around 60-70%. The Facade into Kingdra is enough for the knockout, and Wolf Stellar Pokemon is down.
Getting both of those things, getting the Muddy Water miss that meant that Charizard hangs around, and also not getting the KO onto the Ursaluna is so pivotal for Marco, because now the weather war is set. It's raining at the moment, but when Torkoal hits the field, it'll be sunny from that moment on. That makes life a lot easier. Politoed and Gothitelle, not big offensive threats either. Gothitelle does have Psychic, Politoed has Weather Ball, but a Weather Ball may become a Fire attack here in a moment.
Fire types, yeah.
The good news is Ursaluna very low. We'll go down to the next turn of burn damage. Torkoal very slow and has already used Eject Pack. I mean, wouldn't probably have an opportunity to switch anyway. So it's going to be about getting to that Charizard. If Charizard was already gone, even in the sun, this is probably to Wolf's advantage. But with Charizard still around, it is the big damage threat, able to deal so much to these two Pokemon.
Ursaluna will switch out here, so Marco wants to preserve that 7 remaining HP left on the Terra Ghost Pokemon for later on in this matchup. Torkoal switching in here, just wants to immediately get the Sun active for the rest of the duration of this game. The fake out from Gothitelle goes towards Charizard, so Charizard's not going to attack this turn, and the Fire type now, Weather Ball, which changes typing based on what weather is on the field, is ineffective into Charizard.
Right, that's why the switch is so crucial there. Even if you don't think you're ever going to get value out of Ursaluna in the future, you have to make the switch then in order to save Charizard, which is the Pokemon that you are definitely going to get value out of in the future. It could not protect itself because it's holding the choice specs, and so was very vulnerable to a fake out on that turn. It is looking low, though. Another turn of Solar Power, even with a resisted Weather Ball, is probably a KO. Psychic should be a KO onto the Gothitelle, and of course, they can just protect here for a moment. You got lots of protects when you have Perish Song.
Yeah, Wolf is never out of it here, where Politoed going to protect, not take any damage from this Air Slash, so Politoed keeping itself very safe. Here is the Psychic you were talking about, targeted towards Charizard, and it's more than enough for the KO. So Charizard does no damage on its final turn here in Game 1, just gets KO'd by the Psychic. This Eruption's not going to connect onto Politoed thanks to the Protect, but Sun boosted Eruption into Gothitelle gets the knockout.
Yep, Torkoal, even though it's moving last, they're able to go for Eruption because Marco knows all eyes are on Charizard. Any attack that's coming out is going to go into Charizard. That means that even moving last, Torkoal can get off that full power Eruption and take down Gothitelle. Now it's a very close game and a couple of options for how to go for it if you're Wolf. If he's confident Politoed is faster, you might just go after the KO on the Ursaluna, but you're going to have to take a couple of attacks from Torkoal. You could also just go for a double protect, but no double protect, just the Weather Ball coming in, the KO onto Ursaluna. It's down to just the two Weather Pokemon.
Yes, we set the matchup as Rain versus Sun, and the only two Pokemon remaining are the Rain Setter and the Sun Setter. But Sun has the advantage right now by being active on the field, even though it's resisted. It's doing 50% more damage thanks to the Sun being up.
The leftovers is so crucial, though. Politoed is going to be able to alternate protects going forward and really heal a lot. The sun is going to expire at some point, which will also make Weather Ball a neutral move. Of course, Perish
And
Song...
Eruption will do less damage once Torkoal eventually gets attacked.
Exactly. Once Torkoal gets damaged, it's going to have to switch to maybe a Overheat, which will also slowly weaken itself. Of course, Perish Song, not a win condition here. If the Perish Song were to happen, then the Torkoal would win as the slower Pokemon, so it is going to be down to Politoed clicking a few Weather Balls, a few Protects over the next few turns, and seeing if we can come out in the long damage trades.
This game has lived up to the hype so far in Game 1, the back and forth. We thought maybe with the explosive turn 1 that the jump left knockout right away would have made it in Wolfe's favor, but right now it's either player's game. There's 5 eruptions remaining for Marco. If you clicked it again, that means we have 4, and this one doesn't even do any damage because of Protect.
Yep, the power points may come into play here because the damage is coming out so slowly. Both moves would maximize at 8, but some players opt to go 1 down to 7, so that if you get on-court into the move, your opponent doesn't know exactly when you're going to run out of it. And so only a handful of them left. And with the damage coming in first towards Torkoal and the leftovers recovery happening, it might just not be enough. I imagine that Politoed also eventually has the offense once the Sun expires and Weather Ball turns back to normal move. Torkoal doesn't have the best special defense. But not a situation I've seen play out before. Haven't seen these two Pokemon in this position. Not sure exactly how the damage trades will boil up down, and there's always the chance for something like a critical hit to upend the way things are looking to swing.
Yeah, you've run a lot of calculations in your career, Len, but I'm not sure if you've calculated the normal type Weather Balls into a Torkoal. But we'll see this last one being a fire type Weather Ball for Politoed on this turn. And Eruption, who's taking a little bit of damage there, brings Politoed to around 25% of its HP remaining. But remember, it has the leftovers recovery. Wolf can continue to protect every other turn to continually make that better. The sun has expired, so that 50% damage boost is now gone for Marco.
The time may also play a role here, Marco taking the full time on his turns, even if there's no way to win on damage in the long term, if they could get the match down. Of course, I think the first turns played out very quickly. I don't think that's really a condition, but can't blame Marco for looking for it if he wants to just let this time go down. That Eruption did look like a lot of damage into Politoed. If a lot more of that level of Eruption were coming, then it would be in Torkoal's favor. But Torkoal just lost the Sun. Torkoal's going to take even more damage before the next Eruption comes out, and so they're going to look weaker and weaker. Of course, an Overheat can go back to looking pretty similarly strong, but you only get 1 of that level before your special defense is down again.
Politoed with the Protect here, as we're saying, Wolf alternating between attacks and protects on the Politoed to make sure you get as much maximum leftovers recovery as possible. Marco has 2 eruptions remaining. At what point do you have to risk the Overheat instead of eruptions? Because there are diminishing returns on Overheat, right? You get a special attack drop by 2 stages, so every time you click it, you're doing less and less damage.
It's also going to be probably about half power based on what we saw from the last Weather Ball. It's not the Weather Ball will do less than double the damage because the last Weather Ball was sun boosted, even though it was resisted. This one will just be neutral without any weather augmentation. But yeah, looking like it's probably just not enough damage, but it could be. Politoed is not that healthy. It's only sitting probably 35% health.
Here's the Weather Ball into Torkoal now with no weather on the field. It's just a normal attack, so it's not resisted. Eruption from a 60 HP or 60% HP, Torkoal is not doing nearly enough to this Politoed. Now, if you anticipate Wolf to protect yet again one more time, I think it's time for, eventually he's going to run out of Eruption. There's 1 remaining. It's time to click Overheat.
Yep, I think it's probably about time to Overheat. Looks like Marco's on the same page that we are locking it in. It's also just going to start doing more damage. A critical hit can really swing things. An Eruption may just do enough to get over the hump. You saw how little that Weather Ball was doing. Politoed just really not putting out much damage here. Fully trained in bulk. The role for Politoed here is to be disruptive with Perish Song and Encore. It is not to take KOs, and it's definitely not to take KOs when it doesn't have rain.
Looks like Marco is potentially considering using the final Eruption here instead of committing to Overheat. So he knows he only has 1 left, but the more HP he loses, Eruption does base power based off of how healthy the Pokemon is. So it's going to be doing less, but he doesn't want the special attack drops here. So first it will be a Weather Ball into Torkoal, bring it down to pretty much exactly 50% of its HP remaining. So that Eruption does not do a lot to Politoed, and Wolf can protect one more time, and then we start playing the overheat games.
Yep, makes sense for Marco to get as many eruptions off as possible. You know, as little damage as Politoed is doing, there's going to be plenty of opportunities for Torkoal to attack, and so Torkoal needs to get as much damage out of those attacks as possible. For now, Politoed, though, just going to protect from an overheat, and now the overheat count starts to look a little bit iffy.
Yeah, and less than a minute left of your time on Marco's end, so he's going to run out of time eventually if he does not click his moves fast. But he knows his option is to click overheat 4 more times or he loses the game, so not really doesn't need to make too many decisions here.
Yeah, wants to use as much of the time as possible to try to push towards the match timer, but doesn't really have to think that hard about the turns from now on. At some point, you might think about not overheating into a protect, but for now, it's overheat into Politoed. Let's see this damage. Ooh, that's not bad, but leftovers is coming. And the next one, unless it crits, will do half as much.
And that's the whole point. Because of the special attack drops from overheat and the Politoed leftovers from these, this turn and the protect the following turn, Marco needs a critical hit on this overheat to win game 1. This is so, you got to consider how fast-paced this game started. Action back and forth, and we have come down to a turtle's pace, a very slow pace with these two weather setters no longer in their weathers. It was about Kingdra, it was about Charizard, it was about Jumpluff, and none of them are a part of the end result of this game 1. It's all up to this weather ball into Torkoal, is going to bring it down very low into the red, 33 HP remaining. Overheat is -2, he needs a critical hit to knock out the Politoed, and he doesn't get it. And Wolfe Glick is gonna get the first game in this match after another protect and then another weather ball. We're gonna get there.
Yeah, you might not count out the next overheat crit as well. You can't use the last overheat PP here, but of course, with just a protect, it can fail, and we get one more shot.
Oh, that's right, he's gonna, because he didn't click overheat into protect right now. So the final attack that Marco has left the entire game, he only has helping hand and protect. So if this overheat does not crit and KO, he can no longer damage the Politoed.
Here comes the last lap of the race between the Tortoise and the Toad. Will the overheat hit the critical hit? Politoed looks like it's going to come out on top in this slog. There comes a 3-minute warning, but too little too late. Wouldn't go in Marco's way at this point anyway, and there's just not enough turns left to make that happen.
Yeah, now -4 special attack for Marco here, and he's come down to 5 seconds of your time left. I hope he got it in with 2 there. Oh, but Politoed with the encore at the last second with 2 seconds left in the game. He encores Torkoal into protect, and now Marco has no your time left in the game to even go for a crit.
Yeah, so part of the reason the stalling with the power points was working was because Torkoal couldn't opt to something else or it would just get locked into it. Of course, going for the encore maybe makes the timer more likely, but at this point, Torkoal is not doing damage ever again. And so Politoed is healing over time. Even if we get down to the timer, Politoed should have healed enough over. It isn't just about the percentage of that Pokemon's health, it's about the percentage of the team health, so it's hard to see super clearly here, but Politoed should be the more healthy Pokemon. But of course, Torkoal is just going to successfully protect on the next turn. That's what it's encored into. It failed it on the last turn, so there won't be more damage coming in now, and there's pretty little time left.
Yeah, there's less than probably about 2 minutes left total in the game, but remember, he can only click protect. He's trying, please let me hit overheat, and the game will not let him. He's been encored into it. And a crazy 18-minute game 1 between 2 of the best trainers in the world in VGC. And Politoed will just recover that HP up, and Marco's run out of your time. The battle is finally over. What a game 1, Len.
Yeah, such a dynamic game that suddenly ground to a halt. Both of those Pokemon are there to support their teammates, but their teammates went down in a blaze of glory, traded KOs for each other, and went down quickly, and ultimately, Politoed just comes out on top.
Yeah, there's no way that after the first 2 games, you would have assumed, okay, this is going to take 18 minutes. You know, just the knockouts left and right. Stellar Terra on this Kingdra for the Draco Meteor, doing the double damage into Jumpluff.
This lead was so smart from Wolfe because Jumpluff figured to be maybe the most important Pokemon in this game, would have offered speed control, manual weather changing that made it less costly to switch in and out, but because of the way Wolfe led, used the Shadow Tag to force the Jumpluff on the field and force Swift Swim, there was nothing Marco could do about it. Jump Bluff's fate was sealed the moment it launched in against those two Pokemon. So I think Marco's going to have to be careful about what lead options Wolf has going into game 2.
And what I love about the Terra Ghost, as you mentioned, how once Ursaluna turns into a Ghost type, more importantly, it gets rid of the water weakness, but it will make it so that it can switch out of Shadow Tag, because Ghost types are allowed to swap out of Shadow Tag abilities. And it's so interesting that Wolf has been playing Perish Trap for a decade, yet the new wrinkle in Scarlet and Violet is now these former Pokemon that would have been stuck in front of a Gothitelle can change their typing into Ghost, and that changes the dynamic of the matchup.
Yeah, I mean, this team has an unusual number of ways to get out of Shadow Tag. There are 2 Ghost Terrastallizations on Marco's side. Both the Ursaluna and the Charizard can Terrastallize themselves to get out of Shadow Tag. And then, of course, Incineroar can Parting Shot itself out of Shadow Tag. So an actual Perish Song would probably be very hard to stick. But like we talked about before the match, that doesn't mean that Gothitelle has no value. Gothitelle was really crucial in that game because of how it can control the Weather War and take away some of these pivoting options that makes Marco always look like he's the one in control when we watch those other matches.
Yeah, Marco is on the back foot here. Fortunately for both of these trainers, they are secured in day two at 6-1. The worst that'll happen is that they'll have to try to win more games tomorrow. So they know they're making it tomorrow, but you want that 7th victory right now. You are that much closer to the top cut starting tomorrow if you win this round 8 against such a phenomenal opponent.
I'm really looking forward to seeing what Marco leads here, what kind of safer lead he's looking for against the Kingdra and Gothitelle. No surprise to see that from Wolf again. It seems so strong, but yeah, I think the Porygon 2 is a reasonable adjustment here. Can try to maybe Trick Room and make the trade for Jump Bluff a lot less strong if it's a Trick Room and an Ursaluna coming in, but the Jump Bluff is still there. That trap to just KO the Jump Bluff is still available.
Yeah, and now you have a scenario where both teams are hiding their Weather Setter in the back. Now, yes, Porygon can't literally switch out into Torkoal whenever it wants because of Shadow Tag, but at some point he can spring in it.
Porygon 2 also will just trade damage better with these Pokemon. Ultimately, Wolf won off of like Psychics and Weather Balls and stuff. You're not going to do that to a Porygon 2 that has Recover and Terra Blast. It will just win against things that don't have big offense.
Here is Incineroar swapping onto the field. Sleep Powder, though, it goes into Incineroar's safety goggles. So smart of Wolf to understand that the Sleep Powder was going to go into that slot, and the Psychic into Jump Up does a little bit of damage, but Porygon 2 will set the Trick Room, twisting the dimensions so the slower Pokemon will move first, but Wolf does have access to Fake Out this turn onto the Porygon.
Right, Wolf can use Fake Out from the Incineroar. Opts to play this a little bit slower, sees that with Porygon 2 on the field, Trick Room being threatened, the kind of big play to just KO Jump Off is not the answer. Instead, just chips it down with Psychic and ends up in a pretty strong position in this Trick Room. That Parting Shot is the first thing to move. You can see how slow that Incineroar is. Wants to be the last thing moving when it Parting Shots, or in this Trick Room, going to be the first thing moving. They want to weaken Porygon 2 offense, also made it a little bit harder to bring something else in that slot. But now here comes Politoed. These two Pokemon still trapped in and now trapped in the rain.
Yeah, Politoed will have access to Perish Song if Wolf wants to go for the slow route, but instead, he's just decided to do some damage. Psychic brings Jump Up down to about 30%. Terra Blast doesn't really do too much damage to Politoed, and the Sleep Powder misses. 75% accuracy, and unfortunately for Marco, he rolled 25.
This is looking so good for Wolf already. The mitigation on Porygon 2, there's no way to get rid of it. Can't be switched out of this Shadow Tag. The Terra Blast really didn't do much to Politoed, especially after the leftovers recovery at the end of the turn. And yes, it's taking a lot of time. Normally, you don't want to spend 3 attacks KOing a Jump Bluff, but if you're going to actually get all 3 of those attacks without getting punished very hard, then these Psychics stacking up in the Jump Bluff start to look very good. And like the previous game, Jump Bluff has no options here. Cannot switch, cannot protect, must just take a Psychic again next turn.
Right, and since it's so slow because of the Trick Room, it's almost like Porygon to the detriment of Jump Bluff, forcing it to take these Psychics first before it can go for a Sleep Powder into either of Wolf's Pokemon.
Yeah, Marco probably looking for the Gambit that Wolf went for in Game 1. If Trick Room had gone up while Politoed and Kingdra were on the field, that looks a lot better than just these two Pokemon being trapped in. Politoed going to go grass, doesn't want to fall asleep, doesn't want to take too much damage.
Yeah, so as a grass type now immune to the Sleep Powder if it ever goes into that slot. There's the Terra Blast from Porygon, but yet again doing little damage, and there's the the Perish Song that we were talking about. So Perish Song takes 3 turns. All of the Pokemon on the field that have heard the Perish, the Sleep Powder goes into the Grass type Politoed now, so smart play by Wolf. And he resets the Trick Room for Gothitelle. So back to normal dimensions. The fast Pokemon will move first, but you'll see this 3 counter go down, and in the next 2 turns, if Marco cannot deal with Gothitelle, Porygon and Jumpluff cannot get off the field and will be knocked out to Perish Song.
Yeah, we talked about how many of Marco's Pokemon are able to get out of Shadow Tag. Porygon 2 and Jumpluff are not ones, and Porygon 2 is the one that is the most valuable Perish Song target because it is so hard to deal with otherwise because of recovery and its large bulk. If you can just get rid of it in a few turns, that's great. And not taking the KO on Jumpluff and instead just leaving it on the field means there's not much offensive pressure for Marco. A -1 Porygon, this Jumpluff doesn't even have an offensive attack. These two are stuck here for the long term. Nothing is going to force Gothitelle off the field at all. Incineroar can just come in, can further Parting Shot, can Fake Out, can Disrupt, and Gothitelle is looking so safe and serene there for those next few turns of Perish Song.
And with Incineroar and Politoed essentially cycling every turn in that right slot, it's either a safety goggles Pokemon or a grass type that are both immune to Sleep Powder. So Politoed protects itself this turn from the potential sleep, and then the Ice Beam goes into Incineroar, which is resisted.
Yeah, Marco's best hope to get something out of this is that at least Gothitelle ends the turn asleep, can of course put a Sleep Powder, or ends the Perish Song asleep, so can at least put a Sleep Powder there again. The Jumpluff cannot be faked out because it's holding a Covert Cloak, and so that Sleep Powder can't be stopped. Wolf's not going to want to switch the Gothitelle because that would enable the Porygon 2 to switch on the following turn.
Right, you want to switch it when the counter is at 1.
Or you can also Parting Shot to get the Gothitelle
and then
back
get Gothitelle on the other side. Right, so Gothitelle will swap right now for Politoed to switch in, meaning neither of Wolf's Pokemon can be put to sleep. Excellent play by Wolf to swap there. There is the Ice Beam into Incineroar, and unless he gets frozen, he can't stop the Parting Shot. No freeze to be had, so Parting Shot will get Gothitelle back onto the field at the end of the turn, no longer under the symptoms of Perish Song.
And both of these Pokemon can, of course, just protect on the next turn as well. Wolf, not content to just get 2 KOs with Perish Song, also does it without anything ending up asleep. Nothing really ending up damaged. Politoed is going to get 2 more turns of Leftovers recovery, and then these 2 Pokemon are going to go down, and the advantage is just going to look massive for Wolf. We saw what happened to Marco without Porygon 2 in Game 1. The damage trades just got out of control. He couldn't deal with Gothitelle and Politoed just attacking in the end of the game, but this is the danger of Porygon 2. It just looks so slow, like a sitting duck there against the Perish Song.
Yeah, absolutely masterful play by Wolf here in the final round of Swiss as the most prolific Perish Trap player of all time in VGC, showing why he is so strong at this skill. He doesn't always break it out like we said. He wants to, lull people away. Don't always think that I'm going to bring Perish Trap, but when he breaks out this strategy, he's always so phenomenal with it. And you'll have the Protect from Gothitelle. Sunny Day for Jumpluff to get rid of Politoed's Rain, which makes a lot of sense. Encore into the Porygon, which is a little insult to injury since it is not actually able to do anything. Crucially, he wants to keep the Ice Beam so that Porygon 2 can't click Trick Room on this final turn that it was going to be on the field from Perish Song. And now we've sat through the turns, we've heard the song sung, and Jumpluff and Porygon 2 will perish.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right about that Encore, and Ice Beam at -1 just isn't that much of a damage threat into Politoed, and making sure that that doesn't end with a Sunny Day and a Trick Room while Wolf just double protects, and then maybe there's a window for Marco to come back with these final 2 Pokemon looks a lot worse. Though of course with Charizard able to come out, it's going to be a big offensive threat here. You have to imagine though, Politoed can just come out, come back in again, and then it's raining for the long term.
Eventually, it's now a 4-2 strategy, and if you thought Perish Song was frustrating to deal with before, now when you're down to your final 2 Pokemon and literally cannot swap out, even if you want to turn to a Ghost type, that's also how Perish Trap can pick up more KOs.
For now, though, it's like in the previous game, this is Marco's turn to go out on the offense. Both of these Pokemon look very vulnerable. Gothitelle just protected itself. Politoed is in here in the sun and weak to both fire and flying. And is probably very important to this match. Still has to be switched out, which means that spot is pretty vulnerable. You have to imagine that it's Incineroar coming in. That's the disposable Pokemon here. And Intimidate is also pretty valuable.
Yeah, the Intimidate is going to be crucial onto Ursaluna, who has not activated the Flame Orb yet, so will not have the boosted damage from its Guts ability. So this is a -1 Earthquake into both of Wolfe's Pokemon here. Gothitelle hardly takes any damage. Incineroar takes the brunt of that hit, falling for the betterment of the team so that Wolfe can get a free switch in back into Politoed and get rid of the Sun for the rest of the game. That Psychic does solid damage into Ursaluna, and now the Flame Orb is activated.
Yeah, Marco makes the most of that turn, does get the KO on the Incineroar that needed to switch in there. But of course, Kingdra can come in, Politoed can come in the other slot, and it's a Muddy Water coming in. We saw the Muddy Water on the previous game. It didn't KO the Ursaluna, but the Ursaluna was healthier than it is now. The Charizard also only obviously survived because it dodged a Muddy Water. If Charizard goes down to a Muddy Water, there's also the option to just Weather Ball the Charizard. It can't protect itself, and you can probably safely win a game no matter what if you take down the Charizard here, so wouldn't be surprised for that option, or just to protect here, let Gothitelle continue to do a little bit of work on its own.
Yeah, Kingdra protecting itself from any damage this turn. Gothitelle deciding to match here, so he wants to see, you know, what Marco's plan will be. It's the Air Slash into Politoed and then Earthquake.
Yeah, just some chip damage as well. Both Solar Power and Burn damage are coming in this turn. The Burn damage could make the difference, for instance, in whether that Muddy Water KOs like we saw in the previous game, and there's no harm to this. Eventually, you're going to switch in the Politoed and you're going to attack with Kingdra, so get a little bit of chip for free here. There's no way to capitalize on it for Marco either.
Ursaluna protecting on Marco's side as he anticipates Politoed to swap onto the field right now. And this is exactly what Wolfe goes for. So Politoed, with its Drizzle ability, is going to reset the rain, doubling Kingdra's speed here in this game. Ursaluna won't take any damage on this turn from the Kingdra, but with the Weather Ball, smart to not risk Muddy Water accuracy when Weather Ball will get the job done. Charizard goes down, and it's just Ursaluna left.
Yeah, this is just the totally safe play here. Charizard cannot protect itself. Charizard, even with a defensive Terastallization, is not getting out of that situation. And there's just no way that Ursaluna, being chipped, deals with these Pokemon. Of course, Weather Ball's just going to come in and KO the Ursaluna on its own on the next turn, but just slower than all of these Pokemon and vulnerable to them.
I just think it's so awesome to see this strategy work out to its fullest. The battle is canceled. Marco tweet will become Paris, and he wills it into existence. Wolfe Glick